Seeing unsold 2024 units and unsold 2023 units on dealership lots, what happens to them? What happens to all the vehicles that never sell? New vehicle inventory is not selling right now, largely thanks to their huge price tags associated with many of the vehicles. All these Toyota Tacomas behind me, many of them are over $50,000, some of them teetering just under $60,000, and that's not including any TRD Pros or Trail Hunters. I actually am pretty excited to see this here. This is that brand new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, okay? I've actually never seen one of these in the flesh yet, and people are already missing it. And that's abundantly clear when you look at the price tags of used examples here. $92,480. I hadn't looked at this yet. Absolutely insane. I would have guessed maybe $83,000, $84,000 for this one, but $92,500. It checks all three major boxes that previous generation Toyotas did: reliability, simplicity, and affordability. And if you have to listen to Celine Dion to fall asleep at night, you may love this Hummer EV. Over $120,000. Now, one thing that becomes a huge pain point for most dealers is flooring cost. Every single vehicle that you see behind me here, the Tacomas, the Tundras, is on a line of credit. This, in my opinion, is perhaps the coolest Chevy Silverado you can buy. Hey YouTube, Untamed here. Do you ever wonder what happens to vehicles that never sell on a dealership lot? Well, it only makes sense for me to be at a Ram dealership because these trucks are notorious for sitting at dealership lots for a year, sometimes up to 2 years, unsold. We're talking with substantial discounts, incentivized interest rates, and they still can't move this metal. So in today's video, I'm going to talk through what exactly happens to the vehicles that go unsold, and really what that means for you and I, the consumer, when it comes to expecting great discounts. So stick with me. New vehicle inventory is now collecting dust. Used vehicle inventory is actually selling. It's largely thanks to the huge astronomical price tags that we get on new vehicles today. People cannot justify the monthly payments. Today's video, I'll talk through the many details that are surrounding and haunting Americans alike. It's kind of an awkward stepchild here because of what it is, right? It's not truly a full-size SUV. If you're going to get a full-size SUV, you're going to get a GMC Yukon XL, you're going to go get a Cadillac Escalade ESV, a Chevy Suburban, Ford Expedition. You're going to get a full-size. These are kind of the in-between. And let me remind you how much they want for these things, right? I'll show you maybe a Hemi example. I'll show you maybe an extreme example right here. This is a Hellcat SRT Hellcat, $102,000. For this Durango SRT Hellcat Hammerhead. You know, part of me actually feels bad for Ram because, you know, they pivoted away from offering the Hemi V8. They did away with the Hemi, right, end of 2024, but thankfully they're reeling that back and they're bringing back the Hemi V8. Here we have the 1500 SST. Let me show you how much they want for these ones here. Look at that, still out of touch with reality. $76,000 for this Ram 1500 Rebel GT Crew Cab 4x4. I mean, everywhere you look at this dealership lot, you just have an abundance of unsold Rams that have been sitting here for many, many months. Many of these are actually 2024 units at this point, still sitting here for over a year, comfortably, I would say, right? And this is not indicative of this dealership here. It's indicative of the entire market. Ram in particular is notorious for having vehicles sit on their lots up to 750 days. I'm not even exaggerating there. Absolutely absurd. People don't want to pay this much for these pickups. And as a family man myself, I'll shoot you straight. I don't dislike the Chrysler Pacifica here. I really don't, especially in this kind of neat color. I kind of like them, but I'd be extremely hard pressed to buy one of these over a Toyota Sienna. A Toyota Sienna just makes a lot more sense, or perhaps even the Honda Odyssey. This is a strong third place to those vehicles. What are your thoughts? Now, we talk about it plenty, but new vehicle inventory is not selling right now, largely thanks to their huge price tags associated with many of the vehicles. All these Toyota Tacomas behind me, many of them are over $50,000, some of them teetering just under $60,000, and that's not including any TRD Pros or Trail Hunters. The Tundras down here, well, it begins to get a bit worse. Much of these are over $65,000. Some of them over $83,000 for a Capstone. Capstone, the TRD Pro, $82,000, $81,000, pretty sickening. So we have the huge lineup of Tacomas and Tundras here. Let me show you just one at random. This one is the iForce Max, sporting the hybridization to that twin turbo V6 underneath the hood. This one happens to be a Platinum, but get a load of that. That is the new norm, quote unquote. $73,517 for this brand new Toyota Tundra Platinum. Now, because new inventory is not selling right now, used vehicle inventory pricing has gone up 10 to 15% just within this last quarter here. Even the wholesale values have gone up 10 to 15%. Dealers have caught on to the fact that Most people aren't willing to come out here and pay these astronomical price tags, pay these huge monthly payments, but instead they're willing to save, quote unquote save, $20,000 or $25,000 and buy something used. Get one that's maybe 1 to 3 years old, 20 to 60,000 miles on it, and they'll save some money, lessening those monthly payments tremendously. But because they figured that out, now they're hiking up price tags of used vehicle inventory. It's a catch-22. Now, one thing that becomes a huge pain point for most dealers is flooring cost. Every single vehicle that you see behind me here, the Tacomas, the Tundras, is on a line of credit. This dealership doesn't just own these outright. They have a line of credit on all of them. So generally speaking, the first 60 to 90 days is on an initial line of credit where there's not a compounding interest rate tagging each vehicle. But after that 60 or 90 days, depending on the vehicle, they begin paying that flooring cost. So if you do happen to stumble across a 2024 unsold unit on that dealership lot that had been sitting there for over a year at this point, that dealership has been footing a bill for that thing every single month. And when they have hundreds and hundreds of unsold vehicles sitting on their lot, well, you begin to see where it becomes a problem, right? And you guys know I pick on Toyota plenty because, well, they're an easy target right now. They really are a prime example of lessening quality while hiking up price tags to the moon, right? Totally unfair, especially with the Tacoma. Outsourced it to Mexico entirely for production, have a mandatory 4-cylinder underneath the hood, not even a naturally aspirated V6 option is given at this point, and they still hiked up price tags 20 to 23% across the lineup, across all trims. Check this one out. This is the iForce Max with the hybridized 4-banger underneath the hood, turbocharged 4-banger. Get a load of that freaking price tag. Just under $60,000 for this Tacoma Limited, which is absolutely insane. Now, vehicles like this Ford F-150 Lightning behind me are a huge part of the problem. Ford alone lost over $4.2 billion on their EV segment within the last 2 years. Well, you and I, we're paying the price tag. They hike up the prices of all their other vehicles across the entire lineup, right? The F-150, normal F-150s, and the Ford Escapes over here, you name it, the Broncos, blah, blah, blah. They hike it up just a little bit to make up for that loss, to overcompensate for that loss, right? They have to make up for it somewhere. You and I are going to be footing the bill for it, unfortunately. And do you remember when you couldn't even walk onto a Ford dealership without seeing a whole lineup of unsold F-150 Lightnings just sitting collecting dust, even with $20,000 to $25,000 off between dealer discounts, vehicle manufacturer incentives, right, as well as tax credits being applied, government subsidies, blah, 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 brought it easily between $20,000 and $25,000 off. So on a vehicle like this one here, you see it's just over just under $72,000 for this one. If you brought it down to about $50,000, $45,000, would you consider it then? And for a lot of people, the answer was still no. And that was abundantly clear when we just saw them collecting dust on so many lots. And just a couple doors down from it, we have a brand new F-150 XLT. The XLT's maybe kind of the lower to middle range trim, okay? So it's not the Lariat, not the King Ranch, the Platinum or Limited, right? But still, look at that. Since when? Kind of a low to mid tier trim truck like an F-150 is going to cost you just under $61,000. And it's pretty sad when these Ford Escapes are really among the very few options available that a lot of people can afford. And even these, I would wager, are overpriced about 20 to 25% easily. When you look at these price tags, this one is discounted down to $31,000. Not sure if you can see that too well. This one's brought down from $34,300 to $32,000. This one must be a swanky trim because get a load of that. We're now discounted down to just over $40,000. But this here, many of these options, especially around that $30,000 price point, that is what most Americans can actually justify when it comes to a monthly payment. And do you remember when the F-150 Lightning came out? It was during the pandemic, or at least kind of the height of the whole car market craze, right? Many of these were coming with markups, right? ADMs, additional dealer markups over MSRP, $10,000, $20,000 or more over sticker price. Oh, how times have changed. Now, we talk about it plenty on the channel, but MSRPs have risen 42% on average across all vehicle manufacturers since 2019. So the last 5-6 years, 42% upcharge on these vehicles on average, which is pretty sad here. So for this Ford Ranger, this might just be a prime example of it. Engine produced out of Mexico, transmission United States, final assembly point in Michigan anyway. But get a load of that. Dang near $50,000 for this Ford Ranger. A Ford Ranger Lariat, right? Do you remember this used to buy you a top trim F-150 not that long ago? So obviously all these vehicles, they're very nice, right? But the price tags are far too high. They're out of touch with reality. And when you combine that with the fact that most Americans are struggling, most Americans, the vast majority of Americans, are living paycheck to paycheck. In fact, right now, we are seeing the highest level of 30-day, 60-day, and 90-day auto loan delinquencies within the United States, the highest that we've seen since the 08-09 recession. If we continue the trajectory that we're on, we are going to surpass how bad it got during the 08-09 recession. Let that sink in. We got a deal on this F-150 STX trim, 2.9% over 72 months. Is that sufficient? I mean, it brings it down a little bit from what the national average on a new vehicle purchase is, which is right about 7% right now. So when you combine the fact that these all have huge price tags with the fact that interest rates are still pretty high, they're still pretty garbage right now, it just doesn't make sense for so many people. And an unfortunate truth is so many dealers will stack up their lots with these high-spec, high-trimmed examples, like this brand new F-150 King Ranch. They stack up their lots with them because, well, there's a higher profit margin to be had if they sell this compared to an F-150 XL or XLT, right? Get a load of that. Just under $80,000 for this F-150 King Ranch. And honestly, a part of me appreciates the fact that people are clearly voting with their pocketbook right now. They're not just going out and willy-nilly buying these wildly overpriced vehicles anymore like they used to. Most Americans will generally swap out a vehicle every 3 to 5 years, and well, it's abundantly clear they're no longer doing that. They're realizing that it makes a lot more sense to just perform that necessary maintenance and service to their current vehicle and let it run a little bit longer. Instead of every 3 to 5 years, maybe 5 to 7 years, 5 to 10 years, heaven forbid. Let's keep a hold of that vehicle because that is much wiser financially. Now, part of the problem is not a whole lot of vehicle manufacturers offer vehicles like this anymore. This here, I firmly believe, is a quote-unquote real truck. We've gotten so far away from what a quote-unquote real truck really means and what it really is. Nowadays, so many of these trucks are stuffed to the gills with creature comforts, technology, tiny displacement, turbocharged motors, hybridized motors. But this one here, thank goodness, still sports a 5-liter V8 underneath the hood, that Coyote 5.0 underneath the hood, and it really is glorious. I actually did a review on this video on my other channel. It's called Untamed Reviews. If you guys want to check it out, feel free to do so. But look at that. That is still wildly overpriced, right? Why do you have to spend $80,000 to get into a V8 truck nowadays? That's pretty sad, right? This F-150 Tremor is very nice, very sleek, very good power delivery, a ton of fun to drive, but it is not worth 80 grand, let's face it. And here we have a couple Super Duty pickup trucks. This one here is a gasser engine, 7.3 liter V8, and this one does have the 6.7 liter Power Stroke engine. Not the high output though, right? I do like the blacked out accents and the wheels on this particular one. This one here, of course, a little bit more bare bones, and I bet the price tag is going to reflect it. Not even a full crew cab. Yes, it does. So $60,000 for this F350 right here, right? 7.3 liter V8 underneath the hood. Let's check out the 6.7. This one is not the high output. If it was, this would be red right here, in case you didn't know that. $92,480. I hadn't looked at this yet. Absolutely insane. I would have guessed maybe $83,000, $84,000 for this one, but $92,500 is what you're going to pay for this Lariat trimmed F250. Now behind me are a number of used vehicles. Although used vehicle pricing has gone up comfortably 10 to 15% just throughout the last quarter, it would certainly beg the question, why aren't more people trading in their vehicles then? Well, it's largely thanks to the fact that most people who purchased a vehicle throughout the last 3 to 5 years during the pandemic likely overpaid for it. The dealership that they bought it from likely charged them a markup on it or charged them very close to MSRP for a vehicle that would historically come with a pretty substantial discount, right? So when you combine the fact that they overpaid for their vehicle with the fact that used value prices have gone up just a little bit, it still doesn't make sense. 1 out of 4 individuals right now with an auto loan out still has a negative equity on it, and that national average right now is just over $7,400, which means 1 out of 4 individuals right now owes $7,400 more on their current vehicle loan than what it's currently worth. So even if they were to trade it in, they're still going to be upside down on their loan, and they're not bringing any kind of equity into that new vehicle purchase. And like I said, new vehicles with current interest rates still doesn't make a whole lot of sense. This is actually an interesting site right here. We have a Subaru Outback Wilderness Edition in that geyser blue. And of course, right next to it, in, I think, cactus gray, we have a Ford Maverick. Okay, a Ford Maverick XL, kind of a bare bones example here. These two vehicles, in my personal opinion, do make more sense to buy brand new. You know, you're going to be spending right around $40,000 for a brand new Wilderness, maybe $42,000 nowadays. But buying this one here, you're only going to save maybe a few $1,000s off the original MSRP price tag, which you can easily get, or maybe even a few $1,000s off nowadays, with a better interest rate compared to a used vehicle interest rate, right? So that right here isn't worth it in my personal opinion. Not to mention, or somebody's already owned it. They already put 30, 40, 50,000 miles on it. Same goes for the Maverick. These are generally right around that $30,000, $32,000 price point, especially the XL. Why come out here and spend $28,000 for one that's already been used? Buck up a little bit, get a better interest rate, and over the term of the loan, you're actually going to spend less on on a new example compared to the used one here, if that makes sense. And you guys know I have a soft spot for the Jeep Wrangler 392. This does sport that giant 6.4 liter Hemi V8 underneath the hood, and I actually really appreciate Jeep for offering this, okay? You can tell because it has all the gold accents, 392 up on the hood, of course, gold accents right there. This one right here, I don't know. I don't envy any dealer trying to sell a used example because brand new, you can easily get $10,000 to $12,000 off in a heartbeat. Most dealerships actually just advertise them for about $8,000 to $10,000 off right out of the gates. This, in my opinion, is perhaps the coolest Chevy Silverado you can buy. This Chevy Silverado 1500 with the Bison package on it comes with some pretty sweet steel bumpers, nice wheels, AEV front and rear bumper. It just looks sweet. This is the ZR2 here. I actually owned this before. I had the Duramax version of it. This one does sport the 6.2 liter V8 that does unfortunately come with that lifter issue plaguing it, unfortunately. But vehicles like this, even, Chevy is notorious for offering pretty substantial discounts and incentivized interest rates to move their metal, to include on their specialty trims like the Bison here. So again, I don't envy any dealership trying to sell even this vehicle right here for any kind of premium because it's going to be very difficult. And of course, I talk about it plenty on the channel, but vehicles like the previous generation, the 5th generation Toyota 4Runner sporting a naturally aspirated V6 underneath the hood and a bulletproof 5-speed automatic transmission, although archaic, was a very, very reliable platform. And people are already missing it. And that's abundantly clear when you look at the price tags of used examples here. Vehicles like this, they've seen easily a 15 to 20% uptick in their sale values, right, when it comes to the residuals now, because people miss it, because now all you can get is a turbocharged four-banger underneath the hood or a hybridized four-banger with the new 6th generation here in 2025. People are saying, no thanks, give me the reliable one. And you gotta admit, it is quite comical to see how many used, very lightly used examples of the Toyota Tacoma are sitting on dealership lots right now. 2024 and 2025 models with the four-banger underneath the hood. So many lightly used examples with less than 1,500 miles on them are for sale throughout the country right now. People bought them thinking that, hey, this is going to be your traditional Tacoma, very reliable, very just simplistic. But nope, not anymore. This is a very different Tacoma compared to the days of old, unfortunately. Same goes for the new 4Runner. We're already seeing so many used examples hitting dealership lots, which is pretty pathetic. Hey, not just one, but two Chevy Silverado ZR2 Bisons are sitting on this lot. Kind of wild. So if these new vehicles aren't selling and you're seeing unsold 2024 units and unsold 2023 units on dealership lots, what happens to them? What happens to all the vehicles that never sell? Well, let's talk through it. Now, one thing dealerships can do is they can wholesale their vehicles. And personally, I hate wholesaling because it has historically served as a safety net for dealers, right? And it kind of allowed a lot of dealerships to become kind of snobbish over the years, in my opinion, right? Like, oh no, wholesale value is this. I can't sell you for less than that. I can wholesale it for better than that. And it's just, I don't know, kind of gave them a level of arrogance. And you guys let me know if you agree with that. So I actually appreciated watching wholesale values tank over the last year and a half. They've started to spike up a little bit, like we talked about with used vehicle values going up a little bit. But when they drop down, it kind of forced dealerships to actually negotiate on their vehicles a little bit better, actually give customers a good deal on their vehicles. So the wholesaling is an option for them to pursue. One adverse effect of it is if they receive even a new vehicle like a F-150 Raptor R in particular, the wholesale value of it even today is right around $125,000, $125,000 to $130,000, $10,000 to $15,000 over MSRP, over a sticker, right? So easily they can wholesale it and line their pockets with $10,000 or $15,000. However, that will adversely affect their reallocation rate. They won't be receiving any more F-150 Raptor R allocations in the future, at least for a long time. It'll put them on pause. So that is the adverse effect, and I really appreciate that. Although Nissan is in hot water, they have made some strides to improve their vehicles, right? Especially aesthetically, right? The Nissan Kicks here, comparatively to the previous model year, is miles better. Miles better looking, of course. And while the price tag is bearable for a lot of Americans, we're just over $30,000. Hopefully you can see it there. But the problem with this many Nissans is you get the CVT, the continuously variable transmission. This right here is a grenade. It's a grenade, or a ticking time bomb really, for so many of these platforms. And to be perfectly honest with you, I think the Nissan Murano here, the full new redesign, actually looks pretty good. I think it looks good. However, they're a day late and a dollar short when it comes to having built any kind of reliability reputation with this platform, right? So, although it looks good, like I mentioned before, you cannot polish a turd. And for $50,000, that's still an expensive turd, right? And same goes for the Nissan Rogue. Although more affordable, it is very difficult to get excited to pay $30,000 to $35,000 for a vehicle that doesn't offer a tremendous level of peace of mind. Not to mention your residual value is going to be garbage, right? You buy this, drive it for a couple years, and well, you're suddenly driving a $15,000 vehicle you lost 20 grand on. That's pretty heartbreaking for so many people. Well, ladies and gentlemen, call the whoop-de-doo hotline and tell them to stop the press, because we got a discount on this Murano. Price leader, 2025 Murano, MSRP just under 51 grand. Got a $1,000 rebate, $2,000 discount, bringing it down to now just under 48 grand. You tell me, you buying it? And to be honest, guys, I actually am pretty excited to see this here. This is that brand new Nissan Armada Pro 4X, okay? I've actually never seen one of these in the flesh yet, so I'm eager to get a look at it. But oh my god, $80,000 dang near for this 2025 Nissan Armada Pro 4X intelligent four-wheel drive. Absolutely insane, right? Previously to this, they had a 5.6 liter naturally aspirated V8 underneath the hood, much like the Nissan Titan. But nowadays, well, we're going the way of all the other vehicle manufacturers. Twin turbo V6 now underneath the hood. Pretty sad. It certainly is a behemoth, and if I'm being honest with you, I don't think it looks bad. I don't know. I don't think it looks terrible. I am a fan of this platform, so I have a little bit of a bias, but for $80,000, it is still very difficult to get excited for it. You tell me. And well, ladies and gentlemen, we have a prime example right here. This Nissan Z Heritage Edition is coming with about an $8,000 off discount. It's a 2024 model, automatic transmission, two things already starting to plague it tremendously when it comes to actually successfully selling it. So I'd be curious to know what this dealership actually does with it. Another option for any dealership to deploy is they can move their inventory to their other dealerships within their network, right? So this is a Halliday Nissan. If Halliday had other Nissan dealerships in other states or within the region, they could technically move this to a different region to hope for it to sell there. Maybe it just doesn't sell here in Wyoming, right? Maybe it'll sell better down in Colorado. More people down in Colorado like an automatic transmission Nissan Z, perhaps, right? They can move it within the network. So that's another option they have, right? They're not selling well in one region, they can move it as long as it's within their dealer network. And perhaps I overhyped the Nissan Frontier, I understand, but I do firmly believe that this is truly the last of its kind. I'll try not to get underneath the tree here, but it is the last of its kind, right? Naturally aspirated 3.8 liter V6 underneath the hood is very simplistic, very raw driving experience. It still feels very much like a truck. And I think people are going to quickly miss this, just as we did with the third generation Toyota Tacoma, right? We got to that turbocharged four-banger Tacoma over there, made entirely out of Mexico. At least this here, still made in the United States. So more style points for that. But most importantly is the price tag. Let's look at this Pro 4X model. Kind of a top trim dog right here. Let me show you. So $46,000 for a Nissan Frontier Pro 4X, okay? That's not cheap by any means, but it is very common to get $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 off of these. So many people will chime in my comment section saying that they paid in the high 30s for their Nissan Frontier Pro 4X. And I believe them because that is quite common, and they got an incentivized interest rate. So this right here just makes a lot of sense. Now, another option for dealers is to turn away their allocations and turn away their deliveries. So a lot of dealers were actually doing that with like the Ford F-150 Lightning. Instead of taking them and taking on that burden, they just refused the allocation. Obviously, it had an adverse effect on the reallocation rates, so definitely didn't go without consequence, but it didn't force that dealer to have to deal with a vehicle that they knew that they weren't going to be able to sell. Final plug for the Nissan Frontier. It checks all three major boxes that previous generation Toyotas did. Reliability, simplicity, and affordability. All wrapped up into one. People will miss the Frontier. Now, I think it's important to note here that every single franchisee or any kind of dealership owner, whether it's Chevy, Nissan, Toyota, Honda, Hyundai, Kia, you name it, in order for them to actually become a franchisee and open a dealership underneath that name and sell those vehicles, they need to be able to prove the wherewithal to stay afloat as a company for at least 2 years. That's a requirement, a typical requirement. It varies a little bit based on the vehicle manufacturer requirements, but generally speaking, you need to be able to prove like, hey, I can continuously pay my employees and stay afloat even during rough times. Rough waters, I pretend I can't sell anything for 2 years, I can still keep the lights on and keep my employees paid, right? So that's a requirement. So right now we're kind of witnessing the after effects of that. We've seen a huge dip in sales throughout the last year and a half here. A lot of dealerships are struggling. They might just get to the point where they have to close their doors. And that is the next step right here. So if they're unable to sell a lot of their inventory and they're failing to be in the green every single month and they're constantly in the red, well, they need to close their doors. They need to go bankrupt or sell off the dealership, right? That's why you always see different names on dealerships changing out. Ladies and gentlemen, get ready to see a lot more of this as we teeter deeper into 2025 and into 2026. 0% financing over 60 months. Obviously, that's not too uncommon, especially for Nissan here, but get ready to see a lot more of that. And I'm pretty sure I mentioned it at least once before in the channel, but I have a buddy who works auctions down in Texas. He has seen a huge wave of Acura MDXs, brand new Acura MDXs come through the auction, which is pretty sad. And really what they ended up selling for was at a 35–40% loss compared to its original MSRP. And the sad part, sad takeaway from all that is dealerships would rather sell a vehicle for a 30 or 40% loss compared to selling it to you and I, the consumer, for a 20 to 25% loss, right? That's pretty sickening to me. They don't want to set a precedent, right? They don't want to set this precedent of underselling their vehicles. They'd rather just cut it through the wholesale. Fair, there are some tax reductions and tax write-offs to be considered by dealers who wholesale off their vehicles. So that is a part of the equation, of course, but still, the precedent still stands. Now, if a dealer happens to close their doors and go belly up and go bankrupt, which we have seen throughout this last year, even large franchise dealerships have closed their doors. What happens then? What happens to all those vehicles on that lot? Well, they get turned back over to the vehicle manufacturer. Vehicle manufacturer can then regionalize them. They can pivot them out and reallocate to other dealers, right? I'm at a GMC dealership right now. If heaven forbid, perhaps this one went bankrupt, right? They would then turn all of these heavy-duty trucks behind me back to GMC, back to General Motors, and then they would regionalize these vehicles as appropriate. Or another option is, if there are many old examples, 2023s and 2024s sitting on the lot, which could perhaps be the case on a dealership that shut their doors, right? They could actually send it to scrap, which I've seen and which I've heard of plenty. Dealers or vehicle manufacturers would rather scrap a vehicle than sell it to you and I at a huge loss, right? Again, it goes back to setting a bad precedent and a bad image for their vehicle manufacturer. And I'm not even being dramatic when I say I would actually strongly have to consider, really consider buying one of these, even with the 40% off discount here. Look at this. We got an AT4 example here of the Sierra 3500. Get a load of that. Over 91 grand. Now this site right here is very, very common. Go to any GMC dealer and you're gonna see just this. Lines upon lines of unsold GMC 1500s. Many of them are 2024 units. Most of them are actually elevation trim. Here's another one right here. So many of these are now being pushed with huge discounts. I'm talking $10,000 advertised discount and or a 0% interest rate over 36 months. That seems to be a common one. And tremendous lease deals are being offered for these because they just need to move this metal. They need to move the metal, and well, obviously they can't. And if you have to listen to Celine Dion to fall asleep at night, you may love this Hummer EV. Let me remind you of how much these, oh my freaking God, I hope you can see it. Maybe you can't. Over $120,000 for this Hummer EV 3X pickup. Absolutely insane. I didn't even know they got that expensive. This is actually the most expensive one I've ever seen. 120 G's for this thing. I think they weigh over 9,000 pounds too. It's just absolutely absurd. And in case you're still on hold with the Whoop-de-Doo hotline, we have another vehicle to report. Here we have a GMC Sierra 2500. MSRP is just over $55,000. Only a $2,000 off discount, bringing it down to 53 grand and some change. Or a 3.9% interest rate over 36 months. That is completely insufficient. Yikes. I find it strange that so many dealerships are just holding firm. They're holding firm to their vehicle manufacturer discounts being offered through the manufacturer, right? They're not adding on any additional dealer discounts to it. I do firmly believe that the dealers that are going to succeed are the dealers that are willing to cut their losses early, right? So many dealerships are just trying to hold firm, maybe perhaps hoping for a government bailout again. But I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think the American people are going to support that ever again, at least in the near future, right? Another tactic we've seen dealers deploy, and although not as effective right now, at least on the vast majority of vehicles, is they would issue their vehicles out as demo vehicles to their staff, or allow their staff to drive it around for a few thousand miles, if that, and then take it back into their inventory as a used vehicle. We saw this especially with Toyota, right? The TRD Pro trim models, they would bring in these 4Runner TRD Pros, but instead of hitting you with a markup or an ADM over a sticker price, they would demo out the vehicle, put some miles on it, then bring it in, and now it became used inventory, and then that's when they can start taking advantage of you, and then charge a markup, right, on the used example. So many dealerships try to do that, not as effective right now though. Now most Chevy dealerships look like this right now. A ton of Chevy Trax and Chevy Trailblazers, not because they're wildly popular, but because they're actually able to sell them. The price tags are between that $28,000, sometimes down to $25,000 for a Trax, up to $35,000 for the Trailblazers here in most of the trims, okay? That's kind of the wide range of it. Most Americans with a typical 9-to-5 job can get approved for this, and that's really kind of what it boils down to. People can get a loan approved for these vehicles, and they can actually handle those monthly payments. I'm always quite appalled by the price tags of mid-sized pickup trucks now. I'll show you a couple extreme examples back to back. Here's perhaps the most expensive one. It should be anyway. This is a Chevy Colorado ZR2 Bison, okay? Chevy Colorado, brand new 2025 with that new reef blue metallic color, but get a load of that. Just under $60,000 for this thing. Pretty insane. Let me try to find a lesser trimmed example just so I can show you maybe the quote-unquote most affordable one. It's got to be this. For sure, for sure it's going to be this. Steely wheels. What side of it? It's going to be on the same side. Here we are, $35,000. So $35,000 for this two-wheel drive version of this mid-sized pickup truck here, this Chevy Colorado. And really, it's not uncommon to see most Chevy Silverados coming with a $7,000 to $12,000 off discount. That's common any time of the year. Right now, Chevy dealerships need to be getting even more creative before they get truly desperate, right? So we got $9,000 off those two Chevy Silverado LTs over there. Another $9,000 off example there. No other placards. Well, we got one right here. Only $3,000 off this bare bones example. To be fair, invoice is very close to MSRP on examples like this. There's not a huge profit margin, kind of like what we talked about earlier in the video. A much larger profit margin on a Chevy Silverado ZR2 Bison comparatively to this single cab Silverado here. All right, guys, we'll wrap up the video there. Let me know what your thoughts are on all this. Let me know what the best deals that you have seen in your local area have been and on what vehicle it's been on. Thank you for taking the time to tune in these videos. I sincerely appreciate all of you who especially make it here to the end. If you haven't already, I do respectfully request that you please consider liking and subscribing. Your support means a ton, and I promise you it doesn't go unnoticed. Thanks for watching. Till next time.